They were going to get married, but when his mother saw that his wife was black, she said, "You can't marry a woman of that color. I won't go to the wedding." The late afternoon sun painted the sky in shades of orange and pink as Stephen entered Cafe Aroma, his daily refuge after long work hours. The aroma of freshly ground coffee and fresh bread immediately enveloped him, making him take a deep breath and feel his shoulders relax. He adjusted his thin framed glasses on his face and ran his hand through his wavy brown hair, a habitual gesture when he was about to dive into a good book. His green eyes scanned the cozy environment, noticing that the cafe was exceptionally busy that afternoon. The dark wood tables were all occupied except for one in the corner, which still had an empty chair. Stephen made his way there, balancing his cup of black coffee and the worn book he carried. As he settled in, the cafe door opened again. Stephen looked up instinctively and saw a woman enter. She had cinnamon-colored skin, black curly hair that framed a delicate-featured face, and deep brown eyes that seemed to shine with their own light. She wore a floral dress that swayed gently as she moved, looking for a place to sit. Stephen felt his heart race as he realized she was approaching his table. He pretended to be engrossed in his book, but couldn't take his eyes off her. "Excuse me," her voice was soft, almost musical. "Is this chair taken?" Stephen looked up, meeting her gaze. He was momentarily speechless, lost in the depth of those brown eyes. "No, it's not," he finally managed to respond, his voice coming out deeper than usual. "Please, have a seat." She smiled, a smile that lit up her entire face, and Stephen felt as if the air had been sucked from his lungs. "Thank you," she said, sitting down gracefully. "The cafe is quite crowded today, isn't it?" Stephen nodded, trying to find his voice again. "Yes, I've never seen it this full." He paused, gathering courage. "I'm Stephen, by the way." "Marta," she replied, extending her hand. Stephen took it, feeling the softness of her skin against his. "Nice to meet you, Stephen." Her touch sent an electric current up Stephen's arm, making his heart skip a beat. He struggled to maintain his composure, not wanting to appear foolish in front of this fascinating woman. "The pleasure is mine, Marta," he managed to say, reluctantly releasing her hand. "Do you come here often? I don't recall seeing you before." Marta sipped her coffee, her lips leaving a soft lipstick mark on the cup's rim. "Actually, yes. I come almost every day after work, but usually a bit later. Today, I got out of school early." "Oh, you're a teacher?" Stephen asked, genuinely interested. Marta nodded, her curls bouncing gently with the movement. "Yes, a primary school teacher. And you? What do you do?" "I'm a software engineer," Stephen replied, adjusting his glasses again. "I just moved here, actually. Traded the hustle and bustle of the big city for, well, this," he gestured around, indicating the small town. Marta tilted her head, curious. "And how has the change been for you?" Stephen reflected for a moment, his eyes wandering to the cafe window, observing the quiet streets of the small town. "Honestly, it's been refreshing. The big city has its charm, but there's something about the slower pace here that's, I don't know, comforting, I guess." Marta smiled, understanding. "I completely get it. I was born and raised here but spent a few years in the capital for college. When I returned, I realized how much I had missed this peace." The conversation flowed naturally from there. Stephen discovered that Marta shared his love for books, and soon they were discussing their favorite authors and recommending titles to each other. Time seemed to fly as they talked, and before they knew it, the sun had completely set, leaving the cafe illuminated only by soft lights and the glow of candles on the tables. "Wow, it's already dark," Marta exclaimed, looking at the clock. "I didn't even notice the time pass." Stephen felt a pang of disappointment. He didn't want this moment to end. "Yeah, time flies when you're in good company," he said, feeling immediately embarrassed by the boldness of the comment. But Marta just smiled, a slight blush coloring her cheeks. "It really does," she agreed softly. There was a moment of silence laden with unspoken possibilities. Stephen gathered all his courage and spoke. "Look, I know we just met, but would you like to have coffee with me again? Tomorrow, maybe?" Marta's smile widened, lighting up her eyes. "I would love to, Stephen. Same time, same place?" Stephen nodded, feeling his heart leap with joy. "Perfect." They stood up, gathering their things. At the cafe door, they paused momentarily as if reluctant to part ways. "Well, see you tomorrow then," Marta said, her gaze meeting Stephen's. "See you tomorrow, Marta," Stephen replied, watching as she walked away, her floral dress dancing in the gentle evening breeze. Stephen couldn't wipe the smile off his face as he walked home. He felt truly at home for the first time since he moved to the small town. The casual encounter at the cafe had planted the seed of something he felt could be very special. That night, lying in his bed, Stephen replayed every moment of the conversation with Marta. The sound of her laughter, the sparkle in her eyes when she talked about her students, the way her fingers absent-mindedly played with the edge of her cup as she listened intently to his stories. He fell asleep with a light heart and anticipation for the next day. Across town, Marta was also awake, reminiscing about the unexpected encounter. She smiled, thinking about how Stephen's green eyes lit up when he talked about his work, or how he animatedly gestured while discussing his favorite book. There was something about him, a kindness and depth that intrigued her. She could hardly wait to get to know him better. So, without knowing it, Stephen and Marta fell asleep with thoughts of each other, eager for what fate had in store. Chance had brought them together that afternoon at Café Aroma. Still, it would be the beginning of something much bigger than they could have imagined. The following months were a whirlwind of emotions and discoveries for Stephen and Marta. Their meetings at Café Aroma became a daily routine, and soon they began exploring the town together on weekends. The small town, which once seemed so quiet and monotonous to Stephen, took on new life through Marta's eyes. One particularly pleasant Saturday afternoon, they decided to picnic in the town's central park. The air was perfumed with the aroma of freshly blossomed flowers, and the gentle spring sun warmed their skin. Stephen spread a checkered blanket over the lush green grass. At the same time, Marta took out an assortment of fruits, sandwiches, and a bottle of red wine from the basket they had prepared together. "You know," Stephen began, his green eyes shining with joy and nervousness, "I never thought I'd feel so at home in a small town like this." Marta smiled, her black curls dancing in the gentle breeze. "And what changed?" she asked, though her deep brown eyes, full of affection, suggested she already knew the answer. Stephen felt his heart race. He took a deep breath, gathering the courage to express what he had been feeling for weeks. "You," he said, his voice low and filled with emotion. "You changed everything, Marta." The silence that followed was electric. Marta felt a warmth spread through her chest, her breath catching slightly. She reached out, her fingers intertwining with Stephen's. "Stephen," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly, "you've changed my life too. I think I'm falling in love with you." The world seemed to stop for a moment. Stephen looked into Marta's eyes, seeing in them a reflection of his feelings. Without thinking, he leaned forward, his lips meeting hers in a gentle, tender kiss. When they parted, both were breathless, their faces flushed not only from the sun's warmth. Stephen caressed Marta's face, marveling at the softness of her skin. "I love you, Marta," he said, the words flowing from his heart with a certainty he had never felt before. Marta smiled, tears of happiness shining in her eyes. "I love you too, Stephen." From that day on, their relationship blossomed even more. They spent every free moment together, exploring the town and each other's dreams and fears. Stephen learned about Marta's passion for teaching and how she dedicated herself to each of her students as if they were her own children. Marta, in turn, was fascinated by the world of technology Stephen introduced her to, always patient in explaining complex concepts in a way she could understand. While having dinner at Stephen's small apartment one night, Marta noticed a photo on the shelf. It was Stephen with an older woman, both smiling at the camera. "Is that your mother?" Marta asked, curious. Stephen nodded, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Yes, that's my mother, Rose." Marta noticed the change in Stephen's tone. "You seem close in the photo," she commented softly. Stephen sighed, putting his fork down. We are, in a way, but—" He hesitated, a conflict visible in his eyes. Marta reached out across the table, her fingers gently touching Stephen's. "But," she encouraged. Stephen closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage. When he opened them again, they were filled with worry and guilt. "My mother, she has some views I don't share, views about race, about interracial relationships." Marta's heart sank, understanding immediately. "She wouldn't approve of our relationship," she concluded, her voice almost a whisper. Stephen nodded, the pain evident on his face. "I'm sorry, Marta. I should have told you sooner. It's just, I was afraid it might change something between us." Marta was silent for a moment, processing the information. Part of her wanted to withdraw to protect herself from the potential pain this revelation brought. But looking at Stephen, seeing the anguish in his eyes, she knew she couldn't do that. "Stephen," she began, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands, "prejudice hurts. It hurts a lot. But what your mother thinks doesn't change how I feel about you. It doesn't change who you are." Stephen felt tears form in his eyes. "I love you so much, Marta, and I promise I will face this. I will tell her about us. I need a little time to find the right way." Marta nodded, squeezing Stephen's hand. "We're in this together, okay? No matter what happens." As they embraced in Stephen's bed that night, both reflected on the future. Stephen knew he would eventually have to face his mother. Still, for now, he just wanted to savor every moment with Marta. Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. Stephen and Marta became a constant presence in each other's lives. They were introduced to Marta's friends, a diverse and welcoming group that embraced Stephen immediately. One Saturday night, they gathered for a barbecue in the backyard of Karen, Marta's best friend. The air was filled with the aroma of grilled meat and laughter. Stephen watched Marta interact with her friends, her face glowing with happiness. He felt overwhelmed by a wave of love and gratitude. "Hey, Stephen!" Peter's voice, Karen's boyfriend, pulled him out of his thoughts. "Come here, help me with these steaks." Stephen smiled and joined Peter at the grill. As they turned the steaks, Peter gave Stephen a knowing look. "So, when are you going to propose to her?" he asked, a playful smile on his lips. Stephen nearly dropped the barbecue fork. "What? It's too soon, isn't it?" Peter laughed, patting Stephen on the back. "Man, I see how you two look at each other. This is for life, believe me." Peter's words stayed with Stephen for the rest of the night. As he watched Marta laughing with her friends, the firelight dancing on her face, he knew Peter was right. He wanted to spend the rest of his life with this incredible woman. However, the shadow of the conversation he still needed to have with his mother loomed over him. Stephen knew he couldn't take the next step in his relationship with Marta without resolving that issue. That night, after everyone had left and they were alone again, Stephen hugged Marta tightly. "What's wrong?" she asked, sensing the intensity in his embrace. Stephen took a deep breath, the familiar scent of Marta's shampoo calming him. "I love you so much, Marta, and I promise I will tell my mother about us. Soon." Marta pulled back slightly, looking into Stephen's eyes. "Are you sure? I don't want you to feel pressured." Stephen nodded, determination shining in his green eyes. "I'm sure. You're my future, Marta, and I want everyone to know that." They kissed, a kiss full of promises and hopes for the future. As they prepared for bed, Stephen began planning how to approach the subject with his mother. He knew it would be a challenging conversation, but for Marta, for their future together, he would face any challenge. Autumn arrived, painting the small town in shades of gold and red. Stephen and Marta celebrated 2 years together, and each day seemed more special than the last. Stephen knew it was time to take the next step, but the shadow of the pending conversation with his mother still hung over him. One Saturday afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the park where they had their first picnic, Stephen felt the weight of the velvet box in his coat pocket. His heart was pounding, a mixture of anxiety and anticipation. Marta, noticing his unease, gently squeezed his hand. "Is everything okay, Stephen? You seem tense." Stephen forced a smile, trying to calm his nerves. "I'm fine, just thoughtful." They reached a small clearing where the golden leaves formed a natural carpet under their feet. The air was crisp and filled with the characteristic scent of autumn. Stephen stopped, turning to face Marta. "Marta," he began, his voice trembling slightly, "these 2 years with you have been the best of my life." Marta smiled, her brown eyes shining with emotion. "For me too, Stephen." Stephen took a deep breath, gathering courage. He knelt down, ignoring the damp leaves that stained his jeans. He took the box from his pocket and opened it with trembling hands, revealing a delicate gold ring with a small diamond. "Marta Santos," he said, his voice gaining firmness as he spoke. "You make me a better person every day. Your love, strength, compassion, everything about you inspires me. I want to spend the rest of my life by your side, growing together, facing whatever challenges life throws. Will you marry me?" The world seemed to stop for a moment. Marta stood there, speechless, tears welling up in her eyes. For a terrifying moment, Stephen feared he had made a mistake and had acted too soon. But then, Marta's face lit up with the most radiant smile he had ever seen. "Yes!" she exclaimed, her voice choked with emotion. "Yes, Stephen, 1,000 times yes!" Stephen barely had time to slip the ring on her finger before Marta threw herself into his arms, knocking them both onto the leaf-strewn ground. They laughed and cried, exchanging kisses between words of love and promises for the future. When they finally calmed down, still lying among the leaves, Marta looked at the ring on her finger, admiring how the sunlight made the diamond sparkle. "It's beautiful, Stephen," she whispered. Stephen smiled, caressing her face. "Not as beautiful as you." They stayed there for a while, savoring the moment, until a cold breeze reminded them of the world around them. Getting up, they decided to head to Stephen's apartment to celebrate properly. On the way, Marta couldn't stop looking at the ring, a permanent smile on her face. On the other hand, Stephen felt a mix of happiness and apprehension. He knew he could no longer delay the conversation with his mother. When they arrived at the apartment, Stephen poured 2 glasses of wine while Marta called her parents and closest friends to share the news. The joy in her voice as she shared the news filled Stephen's heart with love. When Marta finished the last call, she turned to Stephen, her face radiant. "Everyone is so happy for us. My parents want to take us out to dinner to celebrate, and Karen is already talking about an engagement party." Stephen smiled, handing her a glass of wine. "That's wonderful, love. They are an amazing family." Marta noticed a shadow pass over Stephen's face. "And what about your mother? Do you want to call her now?" Stephen felt his stomach tighten. He knew this moment would come, but still felt unprepared. I should do it in person, or at least by video call." Marta nodded, understanding. "Of course, love. Whenever you feel ready." They spent the rest of the night planning the future, discussing wedding ideas and dreaming about the life they would build together. But in the back of Stephen's mind, the pending conversation with his mother continued to weigh heavily. The next morning, Stephen woke up early and his determination renewed. He knew he could no longer delay this conversation. While Marta was still asleep, he took his laptop and went to the living room. With a pounding heart, he started a video call with his mother. After a few rings, Rose's familiar face appeared on the screen. "Stephen, dear," she exclaimed, her face lighting up. "What a pleasant surprise. How are you?" Stephen forced a smile, trying to calm his nerves. "Hi, Mom. I'm fine. Actually, I have some news for you." Rose tilted her head, curious. "Oh? What is it, son?" Stephen took a deep breath. It was now or never. "Mom, I got engaged yesterday." Rose's face lit up even more. "Oh, Stephen, that's wonderful. Who's the lucky girl? Why have you never told me about her before?" Stephen felt his heart tighten. "Well, Mom, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I met someone amazing here. Her name is Marta. She's a teacher, smart, kind. She makes me very happy." Rose smiled, but there was a note of confusion in her voice. "That sounds wonderful, dear. But why do you seem so nervous? Is there something you're not telling me?" Stephen closed his eyes for a moment, gathering courage. When he opened them again, he faced his mother directly. "Mom, Marta is black." The silence that followed was deafening. Stephen watched his mother's face change, the joy replaced by shock, then disapproval. "Stephen," Rose finally spoke, her voice cold, "you can't be serious." Stephen felt a wave of frustration and anger rise in his chest. "I'm very serious, Mom. I love Marta. She's the woman I want to spend the rest of my life with." Rose shook, her head, her expression hardening. "No, Stephen, I can't accept that. You know how I feel about that kind of relationship." "What kind of relationship, Mom?" Stephen retorted, his voice rising. "A relationship based on love, respect, and mutual understanding." "You know what I'm talking about," Rose replied, her voice cutting. "It's not natural. It's not right." Stephen felt tears burn his eyes. "What's not right is your prejudice, Mom. Marta is the most amazing person I've ever met. She makes me happy. That should be enough for you." Rose remained unyielding. "I'm sorry, Stephen, but I can't support this. I can't pretend I'm happy with this decision." Stephen felt his heart break. He had hoped, against all odds, that his mother could overcome her prejudices out of love for him, but now he saw that hope had been in vain. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Mom," he said, his voice trembling, "but I'm going to marry Marta with or without your approval." Rose pursed her lips, her expression a mix of anger and disappointment. "Then I have nothing more to say. Goodbye, Stephen." Before Stephen could respond, the screen went black. His mother had ended the call. Stephen stood there, staring at the blank screen, feeling completely drained. He didn't notice the tears streaming down his face until he thought gentle arms wrapping around him from behind. "Oh, Stephen," Marta's soft voice whispered. "I'm so sorry, my love." Stephen turned, burying his face in Marta's neck, letting the tears flow freely. Marta held him tightly, her own tears mixing with his. They stayed like that long, comforting each other in silence. When Stephen finally calmed down, he looked into Marta's eyes, seeing in them all the love and support he needed. "I love you, Marta," he said, his voice hoarse. "More than anything. No matter what my mother thinks, you're my family now." Marta smiled through her tears, caressing Stephen's face. "I love you too, Stephen. We'll get through this together, I promise." At that moment, Stephen knew he had made the right decision despite the pain of his mother's rejection. With Marta by his side, he could face anything. The path ahead might be difficult, but their love was stronger than any obstacle. The days following the painful conversation with Stephen's mother were a roller coaster of emotions. On one hand, there was the contagious joy of their engagement and the excitement of planning their life together. On the other, the shadow of Rose's rejection hung over them, especially over Stephen. One sunny Saturday afternoon, Stephen and Marta sat on the apartment balcony, steaming cups of tea in their hands. The air was perfumed with the scent of jasmine from the small garden Marta had started a few months before. Stephen watched distractedly as a bee buzzed among the flowers, his mind wandering to dark places. Marta, sensing his thoughtful silence, gently placed her hand over his. "What are you thinking about, love?" Stephen sighed, his green eyes clouded with sadness. I never imagined planning my wedding without my mom involved." Marta felt her heartache. She knew how much Rose's rejection had hurt Stephen. "I'm so sorry, Stephen. I know how much that hurts for you." Stephen turned his hand, intertwining his fingers with hers. "It's not your fault, Marta. It's hers. She's letting prejudice blind her love for me, for us." Marta nodded, fighting back her own tears. Maybe, with time, she'll change her mind." Stephen shrugged, a sad smile playing on his lips. "Maybe, but we can't count on that. We have to move forward and plan our life together." Marta smiled, squeezing his hand. "You're right, and we'll do that together, step by step." In the following days, they dove headfirst into wedding preparations. They chose a date 6 months away, enough time to organize everything but more distant than to prolong the wait. One afternoon, while flipping through wedding magazines in Marta's living room, Stephen suddenly found himself overwhelmed by the reality of the situation. The pages filled with wedding dresses, floral arrangements, and elaborate cakes seemed to scream the absence of his mother. "Stephen?" Marta's voice brought him back to the present. "Is everything okay?" He blinked rapidly, brushing away the tears that threatened to fall. "Sorry, it's just... all of this feels so real now." Marta set the magazine down and moved closer to him on the couch, wrapping him in a tight embrace. "I know, love. It's a lot to process." Stephen buried his face in Marta's neck, breathing in the floral scent of her. "How am I going to do this without her, Marta? Who will help me choose the suit? Who will dance with me in the mother-son dance?" Marta felt her heart break a little more. She pulled back gently, holding Stephen's face in her hands. "Look at me, Stephen. You're not alone in this. My parents adore you, you know that. My mom would be more than happy to help you with the suit. And as for the dance, well, how about we dance together? Or you could dance with my mom if you'd prefer. What's important is that we'll be surrounded by people who love and support us." Stephen nodded slowly, feeling gratitude and love for Marta wash over him. "You're right. I have you. I have your family. I have our friends. It's more than enough." Marta smiled, planting a soft kiss on his lips. "Exactly. Now, how about we focus on something fun, like the guest list?" Stephen laughed, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. "Sounds great. Where do we start?" They spent the next few hours compiling names, discussing who to invite, and laughing over shared stories about friends and family. With each name added to the list, Stephen felt his heart warm with the reminder of how many wonderful people were part of his life. Stephen and Marta were immersed in a whirlwind of decisions in the following weeks. Venue, menu, decorations, music. Each detail seemed to open up a new world of possibilities. One particularly stressful afternoon, while debating the wedding colors, Stephen felt the frustration build up inside him. "I don't know, Marta," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "Blue, green, pink, it all seems to blend in my head." Marta laughed softly, recognizing the signs of overload. "Hey, how about we take a break? Let's walk in the park and clear our heads a bit." Stephen nodded gratefully, and soon they walked hand in hand through the park where they had gotten engaged. The fresh air and familiar setting helped calm Stephen's nerves. "You know," he said after a few minutes of comfortable silence, "sometimes I think we're complicating things too much." Marta looked at him, curious. "How so?" Stephen stopped, turning to face her. "Well, all this planning, all these decisions, sometimes it feels like we're losing sight of what matters." "And what really matters?" Marta asked softly, though she already knew the answer. Stephen smiled, his eyes filling with love. "Us. Our love. Our promise is to spend our lives together. Ultimately, it doesn't matter what color the flowers are or what flavor the cake is. What matters is that we'll be there, saying yes to each other." Marta felt tears of happiness form in her eyes. "Oh, Stephen," she whispered, wrapping him tightly. "You're absolutely right." They stood there momentarily, embracing in the middle of the park, the world around them fading away. When they finally pulled apart, both had radiant smiles on their faces. "So," Marta said, a mischievous glint in her eyes, "what do you say we simplify things a bit?" Stephen laughed, feeling lighter than he had in weeks. "I think that's a wonderful idea. How about we start by trimming down our guest list?" Marta nodded enthusiastically. "Perfect. And how about an outdoor wedding? Maybe right here in this park?" Stephen's excitement grew as ideas flowed. "Yes, and we could have a simple buffet with local food, nothing too extravagant." "And for the music," Marta added, "we could ask our musician friends to play. It would be more personal and meaningful." Stephen felt his heart swell with love and gratitude. "Marta, you're amazing. How do you always bring me back to what really matters?" Marta smiled, caressing his face. "It's easy when you love someone as much as I love you, Stephen." They sealed the moment with a tender kiss, right there in the middle of the park, not caring about the curious looks of passers-by. In that instant, everything felt perfect. Stephen and Marta approached wedding planning in the following days with a new perspective. They simplified their choices, focusing on what really mattered to them. The guest list was trimmed down to include only close family and friends. The chosen venue was the park, with a simple outdoor ceremony planned for sunset. One afternoon, Stephen received an unexpected text message while finalizing details with the local florist. It was from his Aunt Tina, his mother's sister. "Stephen, dear, I heard about your engagement. Congratulations. I know things are complicated with your mother, but I want you to know I'm here for you. Let me know if you need help with anything for the wedding. Love you, nephew." Stephen felt a wave of emotion wash over him. He showed the message to Marta, who hugged him tightly. "See?" she said softly. "You're not alone in this. Your family is still here for you." Stephen nodded, feeling a mix of gratitude and sadness. "You're right. I think I'll call her later, thank her, and maybe invite her to the wedding." Marta smiled, proud of Stephen's strength. "I think that's a great idea." That night, after a long and emotional phone call with his Aunt Tina, Stephen lay down next to Marta, feeling more at peace than he had in weeks. "You know," he said softly, stroking Marta's arm, Despite everything, I'm really excited for our big day." Marta turned to him, her eyes shining in the dark. "Me too, love. I can't wait to become your wife." Stephen pulled her closer, planting a gentle kiss on her forehead. "And I can't wait to become your husband." They fell asleep in each other's arms, dreaming of the future they would build together. The journey to this point hadn't been easy, but each obstacle overcome only strengthened their love. And now, with their wedding day approaching, they were ready to face any challenge life might bring. The wedding day arrived, bringing with it a mix of emotions. Stephen and Marta woke up anxious but ready to celebrate the love that united them. The final preparations were carried out with the help of friends, ensuring everything was perfect. The ceremony in the botanical garden was magical. The natural setting with colorful flowers and the sun's soft light provided the perfect backdrop. Stephen and Marta walked down the aisle together, feeling the absence of Stephen's mother but strengthened by the support present. The exchanged vows were emotional and sincere. They promised to love and respect each other, facing any adversity together. The tears of joy in the guests' eyes showed how inspiring their love was. The celebration after the ceremony was filled with laughter, dancing, and heartfelt speeches. Marta's friends and family toasted the new couple, highlighting the strength and beauty of their love. Stephen, though feeling his mother's absence, was grateful for the support and affection they received. At the end of the day, as they watched the sunset together, Stephen and Marta reflected on the journey that had brought them there. They knew that racism and prejudice were still realities they would have to face. Still, they were determined to build a future based on love, respect, and understanding. In this intimate moment, they also discussed their plans for the future. They talked about their desire to build a family together and to raise children in an environment of love and acceptance. They committed to being examples of tolerance and understanding, using their experiences to educate and inspire others. Returning to the party, they were greeted with joy by the guests. The celebration continued late into the night, dancing, laughter, and moments of pure happiness. Friends from different backgrounds and cultures mingled, creating an atmosphere of unity and celebration that transcended racial or social barriers. Stephen and Marta participated in some wedding traditions near the end of the night. They cut the cake together, symbolizing their union and the start of a new life. Marta's bouquet toss sparked a playful scramble among the single guests, adding moments of fun and lightness to the celebration. When the party finally ended, the guests bid farewell with warm hugs and sincere wishes of happiness. Stephen and Marta prepared to leave for their honeymoon. This trip symbolized the start of their married life and a journey of self-discovery and strengthening their bond. Before leaving, Stephen had a moment of reflection. He thought about his mother and the sadness of her absence. However, looking at Marta and the smiling faces of his friends and the new family he had gained, he felt a wave of peace and certainty. He knew he had made the right choice, and that his love with Marta was stronger than any prejudice or obstacle. The next morning, as they prepared for their honeymoon trip, Stephen and Marta woke up with a renewed sense of purpose. They knew their marriage was a celebration of their love and a symbol of hope and change. They decided they would use their story to inspire others, to show that love can overcome barriers and prejudices. As they packed their bags, they discussed their plans for the future. They discussed the possibility of community involvement, using their experiences to educate about diversity and inclusion. As a teacher, Marta saw an opportunity to incorporate lessons of tolerance into her classes. Stephen thought about how he could promote diversity in his workplace. As they headed to the airport, they left behind the remnants of a beautiful celebration and the weight of the prejudices that had nearly kept them apart. They embarked on their new life with hearts full of love, hope, and determination, ready to face any future challenge. They were always together and stronger because of their passion.